What's up, everybody? John Delarose here, the leading Hispanic voice in science fiction. Hopefully the vacuum noise is not too loud in the background. I know it's going on, but it's cleaning day here at the Delarose household. And we're doing a ton of cleaning. I just threw away a bunch of stuff. Get everything tidy, get everything disinfected, and get everything clean. But then again, almost every day is cleaning day now. Seems like in quarantine, which leaves a little less time for reading. So it took me a long time to get through this book, but it might have been the fact that it was just kind of a hard book to get through also. Not sure about that. Today we have Thor Epic Collection, Volume 6, Into the Dark Nebula, which is comprised of Thor 195 to 216. No annuals in this one, interestingly. 1972 and 1973. And this book is entirely written by Jerry Conway. Is it Jerry Conway or Gary Conway? I think it's Jerry. And John Buscema does the art. So John Buscema has a couple collaborators where they get... Sometimes Marvel has some weird crediting schemes. Sometimes it's just him on inks and Coletto on pencils, Coletto on inks. Sometimes there's multiple people credited with the art, so it just says art by John Buscema and Jim Mooney, for example. I don't know if he just did breakdowns at that point and then they really filled things in. From an interview I heard with Ron Frenz, there really is no standard. Like Ron Frenz, even though sometimes he gets credited with breakdowns, does full perfect pencil art and it just gets credited with breakdowns for some reason. Very odd stuff. Don't know, but the book looks remarkably consistent. And if you are looking for consistent art and you love John Buscema's art just as an art book, this would be a good one to flip through because Buscema is one of the masters. Very, very perfect comic art all the way around. I have no complaints on that department. So my complaints will end up with the story, as you'll see in just a second. If you like my reviews, make sure to hit that like and subscribe button and let me know what you're reading. Let me know if you enjoy the Epic Collections and which ones are your favorite lines. Definitely interested in hearing from you, and I appreciate you guys watching. But I'll get right into this. So this has, how many issues do we say it was? 22 issues, and it starts off in 195. This is directly after Stan Lee dropped off the book. Jack Kirby dropped off the book, probably 10 issues prior, somewhere in there, and Stan Lee finished up the run. Once that happened, those are pretty much all the ones that get collected over and over again. So this has not really been collected outside of Marvel Masterworks, which makes it a pretty interesting treat, and that's kind of why I was really interested in jumping right into it. If you're watching in April of 2020, this just came out very recently. So this stuff is not really paid much attention to, and we're about to find out why. Very nice scene right here. We get Thor and Sif, Thor doting over Sif in an Asgardian deal with a dancing girl and all the gods hanging out. Good stuff right here. And as you'll see, we get the Shadow of Mangog. And what you'll find over the course of this series, even though the art is absolutely stunning, beautifully drawn art, we have a new character who shows up, who is Hildegard, who is like Sif's liege woman, and she just protects Sif and fights with Sif the whole time. And you'll find just that the storylines really just get repetitive. I mean, we've already seen, all of Ragnarok at risk and all of Asgard at risk, and Mangog is going to come destroy everybody. Well, we're seeing it again. And this is an interesting time in Marvel's history. After Stan Lee stepped back and he kind of took an editorial position, they really started thinking about the long run, which is something they really weren't thinking about while they were making the comics themselves. And it became about preserving the brand and just preserving it keeping going. And at the time, it makes sense. I mean, you are looking at issues coming out every month, and kids are coming in and reading these who are like 10, 11, 12 years old, enjoying each story. They hadn't read the stories from, 5 years prior. And so they're fine with like getting a rehash of that. There's not like there's collected editions or people following continuity at this point in history for real. So, it makes sense the direction they went, but it also really stagnated all the stories. So these are really just not as interesting or fun versions of what came before. And so you see this nice Buscema art, and it's kind of wasted on just a rehash story of Mangog. And the other thing about Jerry Conway and his dialogue here is he gets way too flowery. Like, you know, of course, you know, the Thor Asgardian language, thou doth speaketh in old English, verily, my good sir. Well, he takes it to the nth degree, and it makes it really difficult to get through the dialogue. And as you see, there's a ton of dialogue on every panel. He's almost early Stan Lee-esque about it, and it's pretty tough, and it makes it difficult to read. Now, the art's nice all the way around, so it makes it a little more palatable. But really, there's nothing happening. You get the same thing. Thor is sent away again as something's happening. We don't know what's going down. Ragnarok's about to come. Mangog's back again. We've already seen this before. For some reason, the ladies are off on another planet, and we get some new characters. This is Silas Grant from another planet where they end up banished on. And Silas Grant stays throughout he's another character who just stays throughout the series, and he's new. And I don't know what his purpose is. Even through reading 21 issues, it's like he's there. He doesn't really have a point. He also brings back Tonanau, the colonizer gal from the original run, which is interesting. She's a very bizarre-looking Kirby-esque character who's very different, right? But she also doesn't matter to these stories. These two characters could be here throughout the entire thing, or not be here, rather, and nothing would have changed. So it just adds more characters to the cast for almost no reason. And, you know, that's just indicative of sort of the writing in here. So Odin ends up almost dead, but because Asgard is pulled out of time, Hela doesn't take him. This gets kind of interesting for a little bit. And then Pluto comes to take him instead and tries to take over Asgard also. And Hela ends up helping Thor to save Odin to prevent Pluto from his dastardly plans. So that's the twist in this version of things. And, you know, pretty interesting. Like, the beginning Mangog stuff really didn't capture me. The Pluto storyline was a little better. And then it turns out the girls have been exiled on a planet. I say the girls, Sif and Hildegard here, and Tonanile and this guy who's from that planet, to this planet where, like, Ego Prime has, like, split off of Ego, and he wants to take over Earth and become his own god. And that becomes a big theme of all these things. There's a lot of characters in these storylines that just want to take over everything and become their own god. And it happens, like, 5 times over the course of this volume. So very repetitive storytelling. Again, this is just Ego, but it's a rehash of Ego that's not quite as Ego. So it's not quite as interesting as the old stuff. And we have this big fight. Of course, Thor's going to win with his friends at some point. And then Thor gets exiled to Earth because Odin's mad because Thor talked smack to him. Again, because this is like the 3rd time or 4th time that he's been exiled to Earth. Now, what's interesting about this versus the times when Stan Lee did it, there's no real, like, Don Blake personal storylines here for you to connect to the character with. So he just kind of hangs in the Avengers Mansion, and all the gods just, like, kind of sit there and read books and eat in the Avengers Mansion and just kind of lazily hang about while they're exiled. So, again, it's just like another version of those old stories, which here you see him as Don Blake, but there's no personality, there's no background, he's not working a job or anything like that. He's just switches to Don Blake for a couple pages. Very bizarre. But it just doesn't pack the character punch. It doesn't pack the story punch. The dialogue is rougher all the way around. This is just a poor man's version of Stan Lee's Thor. We get a little Mephisto action here, where Thor fights Mephisto with his gang. And these are some one-offs for a bit before they get back into the next storyline. And this is kind of where it starts. Loki shows back up. And we have a Halloween haunted issue. I thought this one was interesting because right here, there's this gang of folk that are hanging out, and they're talking about Beast. And if you go to X-Men Epic Collection Volume 4, it references Amazing Adventures number 16. And these 2 issues kind of cross over with these characters. And the characters are Len and Jerry and Steve, which is obviously Jerry Conway, Len Wein, and Steve Englehart, who are the Marvel writers primarily at the time, and they're hanging out. So that's pretty cute that they were put into this. I enjoyed seeing that with them at a party with all these characters. Well, the Absorbing Man hangs out and fights, and it ends up a plot by Loki And there's Loki. It's beautiful. I mean, this, let's see if we can get a little better shot of this pinup art, basically. I mean, these splash pages. Just well done. I mean, John Buscema just has such nice form to everything he does, and I absolutely love it. It's just, it's exciting stuff, even though the storyline leaves a lot to be desired. And that's why I could get through it. And so what happened in the Loki storyline is, what's her name? Sif had to call on Karnilla in order to get help to stop Loki. And because of that, the two women ended up going off somewhere because Karnilla was upset that Baldur's not around. So if Baldur's not around, Thor's not going to get his love either, and it's going to inspire them to hopefully get Baldur back to Karnilla, was the thought. And what happens is Sif goes missing because of that. So that's where the main storyline really starts to take place here. We had a 4D man who's pretty interesting, and he is fighting for his home planet, which is about to be destroyed. And if he steals Thor's god power, he can save his world, is his thought. And so he's a bad guy, but he's doing good things for his planet, I guess. Just doing things the wrong way. Another beautiful pinup art. Look at this beginning here with Thor flying through London. Odd choice, and he just goes to London for a random issue and then fights this like Druid being. This feels like a filler issue that was like stock in the closet or something like that. I don't know what happened here. But the Druid ended up like some guy from the past, from Stonehenge, and just wanted to go away. And there was really no reason for Thor to fight him. So a very non-dynamic issue where Thor really didn't even display heroism for that. Very bizarre. And then we get another rehash. Ulik, King of the Trolls, comes again and fights Thor in a manner that is way less interesting than the last time he did also. And so all the trolls come in, and this is eminently skippable stuff until we get to this issue. This is where things really start to change, and from 212 to 216, we have a real storyline, which I'm actually interested in. I think the end is a little not quite as good, and you see that John Buscema and Don Perlin are credited as co-artists here. I can't tell any difference between this and the other John Buscema stuff, I'm not going to lie. So I don't know how much each man did, but there you go. And Thor is in search of Sif now. They go off to some distant star, and you've actually got an interesting plot line that's a little different for once. You go to Asgard first, and Asgard is empty, save for these weird demon creatures who talk about their past and how these ant creatures have enslaved them and taken them off their world. And Thor goes to fight them, and then it turns out they betrayed them, the lizard creatures did, and the lizard creatures then go and capture all the gods and drug all the gods that they don't want to fight anymore, except for Thor refuses to be drugged. And so he escapes and saves the day, of course. And he wants to find Lady Sif. And they all come out, and they end up on this Starjammers ship that sails through the galaxy. I love this. Bill Mantlo did a series like this also, where it was a pirate ship in the stars. It was called, it was called, what was the name of that? I don't remember. I'll have to think of it. Somebody will leave it down in the comments before I can even think about it. But he did that as a solo series, and I love the idea of like little old wooden ships flying through the stars and having battles in the stars like that. I think that's super fun. So that makes me very happy here, and I'm happy to also see some different storytelling from just the rehashes of the Stan Lee stuff going on. And so they go for Sif, and guess who's back? It's our four-dimensional friend. And it turns out there's this crystal on this planet that has unlimited power. And of course, everybody wants it for their own various purposes. Thor just wants Sif back, and Sif is trapped in that crystal. Oh, no. So now the crystal comes to life in 215, and this awesome storyline that's gone on for a couple issues that's very different goes back to being another rehash, because basically this crystal thing wants energy, and he devours worlds in order to get the energy. Where does that sound familiar? So yes, this crystal Zor is called Zor, I think, Xorr. The living world or whatever, living crystal world or whatever, is actually just a poor man's Galactus, and there you go. And that really bummed me out to see again another rehash of a storyline, but not. And The last issue has so much dialogue and so much exposition to it. It really bogs down. But again, that 212 stretch up till this point was pretty good. I'm happy that the storyline resolved and ended satisfactorily. At least I got that. And I enjoyed those few issues a lot. So it made up for any of the detriments here. And again, we get the colonizers, and there's really no point to having them here. The Silas guy, it does not impact the story whatsoever. We could have not had those pages. I don't understand. Beautiful, beautiful art with these cosmic scenes by Buscema. It's not quite Jack Kirby. It's very different, but I enjoy it nonetheless. So, and of course, Thor saves the day with the help of the four-dimensional man. They break off that crystal being and end up saving Lady Sif. Yay. And next issue, When Gods Go Mad, I guess it starts another storyline. So that's it. This is just eminently underwhelming on the story side. Like I said, all of it ended up kind of like a rehash of the Stan Lee era. And it's impossible, having read those 5 volumes, not to go, oh, this is this storyline again, but worse. And so that's what I saw here. There was no character development, no changes. It was exactly the same stuff that we see over and over again. That whole illusion of change thing that we'll see from Marvel for years on these, especially the major titles like Thor. It's really a bummer to read, and it could have been done so much better. But John Buscema's art's on it. It saves that. So, I mean, as far as things go, even though this was kind of boring on the story side and the dialogue wasn't great, the art is absolutely beautiful. It's nice on that front. It's not like they ruined the characters or anything like that either. You know, it's not like those 90s Daredevils where I was reading them going, oh my gosh, I can't even get through this because it's incoherent. It's coherent storytelling. It's just boring storytelling. And so this is like a 6 out of 10. It is, I'd say, I've read the first 6 Thor volumes, and I read 11 and 12 also, which are Doug Mensch's run on Thor. And I would say this is definitely the worst out of those. And Doug Mensch's I didn't like all that much, but at least he kind of did something different with the character, so it was kind of entertaining on that level, even though it didn't quite fit. Yep, this is one you can skip unless you are a big John Buscema fan and just have to get all of it, or if you're a big Thor fan and just have to read through all of it. I guess this could be for you, but now we find out why all those omnibuses don't go past the Stan Lee era, because they don't really need to. That's about it. All right, guys, let me know what you think of this volume and my review. I will be back. Again, hit that like and subscribe button, and I will see you soon.